biggest difference if you think of China, Europe, Germany, in terms of innovation?
So I can speak for the difference between the US and Europe from my experience as a CEO of a US company. In my opinion, it all starts with mindset. And let's not talk about today's America. Let's just go back 1.5 years or so, because today's America has a completely different mindset, and I'm hoping that the future America will have another mindset again. So when I talk about mindset, it's about risk-taking, it's about the willingness to try new things, while here in Europe, we very often love incremental progress. So what do I mean by incremental? Incremental is the next step. You have something, you innovate in a smaller scale, but you are very successful with this incremental next step, but it's also not a very big risk. In the US, people are willing to take risks and say, okay, I try this moonshot, I try this loon shot, and this is very often considered here as let's shoot first and then aim, but very often this really works. And yeah, so I just wanted to start with this mindset thing for now.
Mindset, let's first shoot and then aim. What do you think?
Okay, my shoot is very simple, speed. So when I look more with my view on China, then speed is the biggest issue. So speed to market, which has happened, probably everybody knows, last 30 years in China was crazy in terms of growth and speed. But speed to market really brings it down to the bottom, And if you look to China, it's very fast, very agile. They do things very practical and very, let's say, iterative. So it's all about doing it fast and then changing. It's constant adaptation and change. And if you compare it then to the West, then we have a very strategic approach and structured and careful, and precise, which is good. However, it's slow. And when you look what the world is doing at the moment, so that the world has a very rapid pace at the moment with change and what is developed. I think speed is more important than ever, to get quick to the market and forget about being perfect.
Thank you, Sascha. What do you think, Björn? Speed, space, time, steps. What do you think?
Yeah, basically, I did the whole presentation this morning about this topic. So to summarize that, I think that in the West, we are very much focusing on creating hype, very often only to generate higher market valuations for my company. That's because the VC wants it, or I'm already on the stock market, so I need a good stock price. We're not so much focusing on results, and that's the difference to China. Yeah, very often companies in China fly under our radar because they are not that much interested in hype. They are more interested in results, and I think that's something that we can discuss further in the rest of the discussion. But I think that's a very important difference between those two areas.
Results-driven, performance-driven. Yeah, I had some subjective experiences with that one during my childhood. So the next one, Clark, what's your take on that?
I would echo a lot of what we've heard and maybe just give a different aspect to some of the same thoughts around speed, because I totally agree with that. I would maybe bring in the idea of acceptance of failure, because part of the reason why, at least in the US and I think in China, there is so much speed is that there's a bias to action, and every time you fail, you learn. And so the idea is to fail as quickly as you can, because essentially you're learning, you're running experiments. Everyone I know in Silicon Valley who's trying to get a company going, they're essentially running experiments all day. We sent 100 pitches with this to 100 CMOs. We got this response, now we'll tweak it. I mean, from software, which is what we all know about how it's never done. You get a new update every week. It's never finished. It's never perfect. It's always evolving. You've paid for a subscription. I mean, we're all in this world of the US failure culture model. Venture capital is a system of financing where failure is baked into the model. You expect 80% to go bust, and you live from the power law of a couple of your investments doing great and returning the entire fund. So it's an entire system based on encouraging or accepting failure, or being ready for it. I mean, we've all seen Elon Musk on his way to Mars by blowing rockets up all the time and learning from it and saying, we'll be back next week. So I think this is just a huge element. Unfortunately, in Germany, I mean, it's a great thing about Germany and the mindset, but if the three industries are cars, machines, and chemicals, at least in two of those, you can't be wrong. You know, your car shouldn't blow up, and your machine should have precision. So I totally understand how a culture based on an industry of exactitude and perfection and pride in the perfection of these products that's a global brand, how that can end up being a trap and making you very averse to ever letting anything fail.
Interesting. The famous 80-20% and simply shoot to the moon, shoot high, blow up, and then until you get successful. Björn, you mentioned today in your keynote about China and Western that here, with growing company size, you get slowlier, whereas in China, big companies get faster. Would you like to elaborate a little bit about that one?
Yeah, that's an interesting discovery when you look at Chinese companies. For us, because it's not only economies of scale, there's also diseconomies of scale. Yeah, because a bigger company has more politics, things tend to be slower because of all these things, and that's something that we think is totally natural. Yeah, it can't be different. But on the other hand side, a bigger company has much more resources. And if you look at a company like Xiaomi or Huawei that we looked at this morning, Xiaomi spent 11 billion on building a car business, and within 1,123 days, they not only developed a car, but also built a complete factory. Yeah, and brought all this in place, and now has a very successful car business that is a real headache for Elon Musk in China. Yeah, and in less than or about 3 years. So I think it's a very good example for a very huge company that's still extremely fast and very efficient.
Speed, we all know these YouTubes and TikTok videos where entire buildings, skyscrapers are just set up within weeks and months, not many years.
I would be happy to jump in a little bit, if I
Please
may.
do.
Because I like what Björn said, because I also know those companies, and I was working with friends at Hire, also the company you mentioned, and I wanted to resonate with something that Clark also said. Well, first of all, it's not that in China every company is getting faster when they go bigger. Some of them get slower, like Alibaba lately. Took them a while, however. But when they get bigger and have more resources like Hire, they try to, as we said, they cut out the middle management. They try to bake their fast A/B testing approach into their company culture. I think that's the interesting part. And that's different to the Valley, right? So I think that's a very interesting assumption, how they're going to do that. And some of them, maybe there's this old wolf culture, which I think they elaborate on, try to do it like a wolf pack, and they're trying to bite everything away to be fast and don't have the slow people. So I think that's a very cultural issue they learned, copied kind of, and then baked into their new strategy, because everything is new. That was not there 10 years ago. Yeah.
Absolutely, and please just jump in if you grab
I have a thought or a question, because this sounds amazing. How is regulation in China handling these large projects? Because here in Europe, we often need like 3 years to just, get the regulator convinced that we can proceed. I assume there is a very close collaboration between authorities and economy. How are they doing this?
Yes, there is, and I think I have no insights into this, but I think local government, if you want to build a factory there, is very cooperative and helps you with in every aspect. But Elon Musk took 1.5 years, I think, to build his factory in Brandenburg.
By promising the authorities that he will tear it down just in case the regulation.
But that was a very good example for fast is also something that we can do. It's possible. If people want it, then it does work. So we don't always have to look to China. We can also look to Brandenburg to see that it works here too.
So maybe that's the American way to speed it up, to bring pressure. I would say in China both are two ways. One, I mean, if you go into a direction the government doesn't care or doesn't want, then you have lots of extra, work to do. But if it's in the 5-year plan or if it's in a very specific area, they want to make very fast, approach. Then there's almost no regulatory for at least 2 years, and then they pull the plug, and then the fighting goes on.
This is a question I'd love to ask Katrin and Mirko about this. How and when governments get involved in pushing or creating an industry and creating innovation, because I've never been to China, so this is a stupid third-hand impression of everything you read. But what I always hear about the way the Chinese market works that people admire so much is that in China there's incredible competition for a new industry, and maybe it's local and regional governments helping and pushing, but incredible cutthroat competition. And if you can survive that competition and win, and you're one of the maybe 2 or 3 that win in China, then maybe the national government would step in and help you be the global champion. But you've already done so well competitively. You're already so competitive that you have just an inherent advantage. And I think how SPRIND, your agency, had to overcome the legal hurdles of, oh gosh, the government is funding something that didn't work. Like this whole notion of picking winners, you now have freedom. We had an extra law passed for Germany, for SPRIND, to be able to do challenges and not have to pick winners, but let a lot of players onto the field try and get to the same goal. So I'm just curious your thoughts about, for both of you, the best practice for how can we, end up with some champions but get there without picking winners? Is it either just cutthroat competition, or is it maybe allowing some failure into the German system? I'm just curious for both of you guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, this is a great point. We at SPRIND, with this freedom law, really have a globally unique position. We were modeled after the US-American DARPA or ARPA at the very beginning.
Which gave us the internet.
Absolutely.
And GPS.
And in the meantime, with the freedom law, we can really act just like you described. Where I was coming from with my question was really also a little bit from a competition of the political systems aspect. Because if you look at China, I just heard it from you, if it's in the 5-year plan, there's no regulation, you can steam ahead. And if it's not, then it might be very tough to go forward. On the other side, we have here a system which is more democratic and free, but on the other hand, the regulators, and I'm not talking about SPRIND because, as you said, we can really act really, really nicely, but the regulators in general in Europe are very, very much in this mode of preventing any damage at any cost. And this is maybe something we can really learn from the Chinese, like if it's in the interest of Europe to steam ahead, for example, in AI, which is something that I'm working very hard at to make sure that Europe catches up, because we need to catch up, I think it's obvious. Then, on the other hand, we have regulations like the AI Act, which really stifle a lot of our efforts, even though we at SPRIND have the freedom law and can do challenges and fund. The actual startups are handcuffed compared to Chinese startups and US startups. So we have a really interesting time and age where we are living right now in this competition of different systems. The more free Western system or the more regulated Chinese system. On the other hand, more regulated seems like, no, it's not, if you're doing the right thing. So very interesting.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
on Mirko's point, and it's getting hotter here from temperature, is mindset again, and we need to catch up. I find it quite interesting. Here we hear often, imagine a marathon, you stand aside and we first watch. If you don't do anything, you can't do anything wrong, right? So we watch and until the end, we're gonna win, we're gonna catch up and we're gonna win. When did you see this happen? You wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say that there is AI regulation in China in effect, but the more cleverly one done than in the EU. Yeah, so it's not like it's free for all, Wild West, and everybody can do anything just because it's in any plan. Very often there is regulation in China as well, but in a way that makes much more sense than here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from the perspective of a European regulator, they just want to prevent harm. But this brings us back to this mindset thing that I mentioned at the very beginning. You need to have the mindset to dare new things, and here in Europe, we need to admit that we are behind, and that this notion that you just mentioned, that we are standing at the sideline and doing nothing wrong and let the others run first. It's a nice metaphor because AI and robotics is where I'm working in currently, and there was just this robot marathon in China where a lot of robots ran a marathon actually, which is super nice to the metaphor you just used, and we are literally standing at the sidelines at this moment. So we need, first of all, we need to admit that there is a race going on and that we need to catch up. And admitting this is hard because for the last 40 years we were always the trailblazers, and now we need to see that in AI, robotics and other future-proof industries, other than cars and machines and chemicals, we are behind. Which is something what we at SPRIND recognize and do a lot to actually invest in startups and inventors and trailblazers who want to run this race and not stand at the sideline that you just mentioned.
I can give you a sad footnote on the AI debate. Right now, this week in Europe, there's a gigantic storm raging about the AI Act because the guidelines that are supposed to be published for companies to abide by, starting with models, are late. They missed their deadline. So the industry is saying, oh, we're supposed to start on August 2nd if I'm Mistral in Paris and I have a model. I don't even know the rules yet. Could we get a bit of a timeout here? Could we delay it? So the industry's done a huge letter signed by Airbus, everybody today saying, please, can we stop the clock? That's the movement. So I got an angry mail from friends in the AI office in Brussels today with their talking points of why we really, really need the AI Act. And they said it's all about product safety, and we have product safety in food and aviation and all these other things, and AI is just as risky. We should have product safety in AI. But now I sit here and I reflect and I think, from the Wright brothers to product safety in aeronautics and aviation, we had what? Half a century? So here we are in what year of the AI industry? And the EU is first out of the gate with a regulation before we even know where this is going. Imagine if we'd regulated flight in 1920, we weren't even there with invention yet. So it's just kind of maddening.
There's one joke going on: if you can't win it, you can block it.
Yeah, of course.
I really like this metaphor because I use a similar one when I'm explaining the problem to regulators and others, which is, let's go back when the car was invented. Would we have asked for an airbag and ABS at the very, very first few years, which is exactly what another way to do the same metaphor that you did. But if you would have asked car Benz to make sure that an airbag and an ABS is in, there would have been no cars.
Mrs. Benz, has your carriage been certified as safe to drive on these roads across Baden-Württemberg? No, she just went. That's kind of the principle.
I think the interesting part, it brings us a little bit back to the beginning of speed. So we want our companies to gain speed, but our governments, they want to prevent everything, so they kill kind of speed, but they're also not allowed to make mistakes, right? We don't want the government to make mistakes, but actually, and now I'm referring a little bit to China, they at least they give direction, but they know there will be mistakes. And for example, there's this old, maybe if you went ever to Beijing, there was this pile of bikes, bicycles hanging around because this ride share with bikes get totally out of hand. But then it was, kind of fixed in a half a year, right? So I think even when you want to have speed, then also our governments need to be able to make a mistake, but it would be happy if they can, change the mistake within half a year, which they are not able to. I think we have the same speed issue with our democracy and with the administration. I think this is one of the core underlying problems that we have at the moment. Yeah.
The pesky press and opposition.
I really like the point that you press on speed, because I think where China and the US are united is that they have a few less layers when it comes to the political execution system. When we look at Europe, we have Brussels, obviously, then we have the different countries. Within the countries, we have the states. Within the states, we, for example, have Landkreise and similar thing, and then we have even smaller units. And if something needs to percolate all this way down, again, in the AI field, we have the AI Act, and yes, they are late, but we all have the preprint, so we know what is coming. But this is contradicting, for example, in part with German copyright law and with other laws in Germany. It's just contradicting. And then you need to ask yourself, okay, these guys are regulating this. We don't have a fair use concept of content, for example, here in our copyright law, but in other European states we have. So one of the speed issues that we are having is that we have too many layers. I'm not voting for implementing a Chinese system now where one central bureau says this is the way to go, but thinking about all these layers and how we can maybe streamline this a bit is something that would help a lot to make sure that Europe advances fast.
Mirko mentioned the layers. Björn, you mentioned the layers in terms of shutdown, middle management, direct face-to-face contact with a client quite fast, at fast speed. What's the coolest environment you could build to drive this innovation? We talked about a few challenges, regulation. Would you, and again, if I may, a picture for you. Once upon a time, you dropped me the ball with a car invention. Did we regulate the engine of a car, the software of a car, the core of a car, or did we later regulate the outcome in terms of you can drive that fast, speed limit, if you park at the wrong side, you have a parking punishment, and so on? What's your take? Open round, just say.
Maybe one thing, at the beginning with the cars, I think nobody in government understand how it worked. Yeah. So they could not regulate anything because they didn't understand. Today they try to pretend they would understand, which they still don't. But there's this issue that there's an expectation to make regulation before everything is getting out of hand. I think is the biggest help would be to open it at least a little bit up, and that's why we refer a little bit to China system, is that they give they give you a year or something where you can elaborate and try before actually the regulators have understand how it works and go in. And while that works, they do fierce competition. They pour money into the system, and actually the federal states, they are fighting to get the next unicorn in their area because it helps them to grow. And I think we have forgotten how this kind of competition also on the governmental side works. We're trying to be easy, too easy, I think.
To answer your question, two things. First of all, the first traffic light in the world is at Potsdamer Platz in Berlin. You can still go see it. It's a little tourist attraction in the middle there. So the regulation sprang up out of people dying and understanding the need to start introducing safety measures. So, I mean, it's an interesting point, but if you want to flip things on their head, I could actually also spend a minute talking about how regulation can lead to innovation and create markets in some cases. Case in point, Mickey Mouse, this intellectual property. We didn't have copyright in music or then film or books or anything for most of mankind's history. It was just oral, unprotected. But once we got copyright and intellectual property rights, vast industries have been created around music, around books, around art, around film, because you could monetize it. You could invest and make money in it. Now we'd argue it's maybe lasting too long, but I look right now at the PSD2 directive. I don't know if anybody knows this. Europe led the world in enabling you as a bank customer to give another bank permission to get your data so that the neobank, N26 on my phone, could make me a customer quickly and instantly and conveniently. And that was a regulation to create a whole new market and innovation. And there's long lists of these kind of markets where actually the law stepped in, and by giving clarity, we see it with the Markets in Crypto Act in Europe with cryptocurrency. If you give clarity, sometimes you can create innovation. So I'm not here to just bash all regulation and all government per se. Sometimes government can step in and give you clarity and investment safety so that you can create a market and create prosperity. But that's a balance that has to be struck.
Hey, I couldn't agree more that this is a great example and that the balance makes the difference, and this is also an opportunity for Europe. So I really like the traffic light example. This is absolutely awesome. If we look at the copyright example, it brings me back to my very initial mindset thought. If we look at China and the US, there is a lot of technology optimism, like we can solve even the large problems of humanity with technology. And if you have a mindset like this, then regulators follow this mindset and come up with regulations that drive or even accelerate innovation. Because in the US, you have a democracy just like you have here, and the regulators are in the end doing what, we are democracy, what the people in this democracy want. So if the mindset of the people is technology optimism, then the regulation will follow. And I think this is a super important thing. If you asked, what world would you dream up to really drive innovation here in Germany? I would really love to see us Germans coming back a little bit to this time, which is a few years ago in the meantime, where technology was seen as something that helps us, where innovation was seen as something that helps us, and a little bit less of the skepticism. And the AI regulation and also the overly tough copyright laws over here are stifling AI progress. The copyright laws in the US include a concept that is called fair use. They still have really, really tough copyright laws and copyright infringement. Wow, this costs you millions and billions of dollars, but there is fair use. You can, in certain circumstances, use an intellectual property. And right now, at this moment, we could not train something like a ChatGPT in Germany without violating 10 laws. In US you can, but we are allowed to use it. So I'm 100% with you when you say we should not really only bash regulation, that would be too easy. But the balance between how much do we regulate and can we come up with smart ideas, for example, fair use, I think then we in Europe can really have even a trailblazing role when it comes to innovative regulation.
Thank you, Mirko. Just a very short, I would like to one more time give you the opportunity. Just stand up if you have a question, dear audience. Yes, please. Niels is coming with a microphone.
It's like Uber, you can see your mic is on the way. Here it is.
Thanks a lot. So I'm Fan Chu. I come from China and I have worked in Germany for more than 15 years in the largest chemical industry. So I like your discussion about the regulation and also economy very much. When you ask about how does the regulation in China for EV has developed, I see, if we're looking at the title, innovation and economy, I see why China has been really strategically pushed EV. It was 2009 from the 5-year strategic. The first 5 years, it was not successful. Nobody moves. It doesn't matter if it's international or it's domestic, nobody moves. That's why 2012, Tesla was introduced to the Chinese market. It shows the market, look, there's something that can work. It's from 2019, the first regulation starts really coming in to come. And all the scale up starts. Starting from 2020 till today, 5 years, EV has really not EV 5 years before. EV is not EV 10 years before. I would say, it was a little bit about why China did that strategic decision. because he did not have other way to build up automotive. I think this is because of the need of the economy, the need of the people was driving, to the innovation to go that way. I think the government has been, I don't talk politically, but I think on this action has steered very smartly, strategically. Then he first invited the first player, like the first wolf, into the forest. And then after about 10 years, he started to put the regulations in. I think I would say that's a good reflection also for chemical industry where I have been in. In China, it also has been very fast in the last 20 years. So I think this is always things to see that how the regulations, I would say, gave the first freedom and standardize the industry. But from another direction, the regulation, what has been established in Europe, is also setting the quality standard. Most of the KPIs of EVs are still mostly tested in Germany. So for this direction, I think, as we industry players in Germany, I see even a lot more opportunities because, the reputation, the system, the standards has been set up there. Sometimes I reflect with my team how we motivate us to run like the wolf are chasing us behind. Unfortunately, I felt that we have been settled for a long time, a good life. No wolves were chasing us, and we probably was just watching others get chased by wolves. I felt that, as industry players, I encourage also my team very often to see that how we really can get, our internal drive to really put onto market. Then our economy and our innovation will be revived. And all the rest, looking at the regulations or looking at about the systems, probably if the impulse is big enough, we always find a way. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. You want to say anything? Because of time, I very much appreciate, thank you for your comments and thoughts. We're gonna make a final round, and you can say something if you wish to that concrete point. The final question of you all, again, open, would be what is your biggest learning? And you can also say a little bit, keep it short and to the point, about your personal experience in China. Your biggest takeaway learning you would like to share to the audience. Mirko?
Since my experience is more on the US side of the house, I would pass on.
Maybe I would say something later, to the question, or maybe let's have a discussion. I'm happy to. From the learning point, I think, and I'm referring to my learning when I was in China in such an environment. Maybe not sure if Clark has a different one also from the Valley. I had to trade in some of my perfectionism for speed and wild experimenting and a little bit of craziness. So that's something would be my wish, to say, let's trade in a little bit of this perfectionism and let's use this, free energy to put it into something, more speedy and more get us forward. I think that's something we can do. We can do a structure around it.
So Sascha goes to better done than perfect. Björn.
What I've learned from China, actually that the learning, that was also one of the last slides, I think, of my presentations, that what we could learn from China is being willing to learn. And first trying to understand something before you judge it. And very often we do it the other way around. We are very willing to judge something even before we've understood it. And that's something that I think that's the perfect lesson that you can draw from China. Being always eager to learn something new, very interested in learning something new, and help to eliminate what I call the asymmetric ignorance. The fact that in China everybody knows everything about us and we don't even know what we don't know about China.
I'd say from an outsider's perspective, I'll say what I've learned from both China and the Valley. From China, it really is check your assumptions. I think 20 years ago, before the rise of China was really complete, everybody in the US thought state-sponsored, capitalism, or this model is not going to be a threat or not really going to work. And I think China has proven everybody wrong with the way it has prospered and built innovation. And also, even just in a microcosm in AI, until 4 months ago, we all thought the AI race was over, and ChatGPT and a few American companies had the market already dominated. And along came the open source DeepSeek model. China rewrote the rules using open source. And so that's one learning out of China, is just really check all your assumptions. A totally different system could actually beat you. And then from the Valley, this week, I don't know if you saw, Mark Zuckerberg went out and decided he was going to get the best brains in AI, even if it cost $100 million per person. And went out and recruited a dream team of more than 10 people. He poached most of them from OpenAI. But have you seen who they were? They weren't Americans. They were Chinese, Indians, and Europeans. So what is it about the Valley that's attracting the best brains? And today, de Robert, our new Minister of Innovation, said, we want the best brains in Germany, which I think probably used to be a controversial thing to say in Germany. Like, don't be afraid of excellence and wanting to be the best, because your competitors aren't afraid to say that.
I can 100% agree to that. And without wanting to be too political, Mr. Trump is our best salesman at this moment, because he helps us to re-attract the talent back to Europe, which is exactly what you just mentioned.
With that, that's a super, super good end statement. So we have got mindset on board, speed, pace, not either or, but both together. And
failure.
And better done than perfect. Dare something. Innovation per nature includes failure. I love China, I love Europe, and I love Germany. With that, thank you so much, dear panelists. Mirko, Sascha,
Thank you.
Yuan, and Clark. Wonderful having you. 谢谢你大家，好棒。